Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Thank you everyone for joining me again for another episode. Today we are going to be speaking with an athlete and coach who has a master's degree in exercise science, and you're probably going to recognize her name and her voice because she is the co-host of Redefine Healthy Radio, Team LocoFit Roundtable, and the Unglamorous Life Podcast. She founded Team LocoFit to provide quality coaching that puts the client's long-term interests first with an educated, evidence-based approach to all matters. So welcome to the show, Laurin Conlin. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Celeste. Thank you so much for having me on. That was quite the intro. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yes, I'm so happy you're here. And I know that there's going to be a lot of listeners who are thrilled, I'm sure, to know that you're on the show right now, and who even submitted questions. So it'll be really awesome to hear from you. But before we get into everything, I always like to know if there's something you do or a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage.
Ooh, before my heel hits the stage. I'll give two. One's kind of a funny one, and then the other one's more of a serious answer. So first and foremost, if you've ever been a client of mine or you follow me on social media, you see that I always drink wine before I compete. And it's so funny, I really enjoy wine. There's a physiological reason to drink it beforehand, but I always found that I would have a little bit, I'm not getting trashed beforehand, but I'm having, a few sips of wine while I'm pumping up and I'm getting ready. And that's kind of something that I really enjoy to kind of put me in a certain headspace. And people have asked me well, I don't like wine. I'm like, no, you don't have to have it. It's just something that I like doing backstage. But as far as heel hits the stage, what is going on through my mind? Really, I think that a lot of people who do competitions, we put so much effort into all of the preparation, right? You may have dieted for 4, 5, 6, 10 months to get here. And this is really the most important time to showcase your work. This is it. And a lot of people don't take that part as seriously as they should. In my experience, and I've done this before too, I've been backstage, laughing with people, joking. I'm pretty extroverted, so I'll just talk to anybody, and you're kind of you're not in your zone, right? And then there's other people who maybe are too to themselves, and then they get really, really nervous and they get all freaked out. And then when they get on stage, they don't showcase their best, package. So really, before you're getting on stage, you need to be in a zone to where you're 100% focused and dialed in to what you're about to do and the task that you're about to have, about the task that is on hand. God, I can't say that. Task that is on hand. And if you've done enough visualization, you've done enough practice beforehand, you're typically going to be able to do that. But it really is, it just needs to be taken seriously, which is something that I messed up early on in my career many times.
Okay, wow. So I have two questions. One, did you ever get in trouble for drinking wine? And then two, when did you realize you weren't being serious enough backstage?
No, so I don't bring just a bottle or a 6-pack of beer backstage. I put it in a cup, so nobody's really checking that, I guess you could say. So I just put it in a little cute cup, or you get the little tiny bottles. Those are the boxes now. They actually, boxed wine, the smaller servings, have really stepped up their wine lately, not gonna lie. So yeah, I wouldn't suggest just rolling in with bottles of wine, but if you have it somewhat in a concealed thing, no, nobody's gonna say anything. So that's first and foremost. But then second, as far as when was I not taking it seriously, I realized that it was before. So it was my second bikini show ever, which happened to be Universe in 2014. And I was backstage, I was talking to everybody, I was, doing stuff. And at this point, I had just transitioned to bikini. And so I was just meeting new people and whatever. And then literally as they call my name, I was like, oh wait, I need to go on stage right now. And I just remember going out there feeling very like flustered, you know what I mean? Like, oh shit, now I got to regain focusness and actually hit this routine. So the times that I've really, really dialed in my mentality were the best times. And then since other times when I've, strayed that, whether I've been, really stressed out or running around or whatever, not giving myself enough time, 100% affects my performance and how I look on stage.
Wow. Okay, got it. So something I want to acknowledge very first off is that it's really awesome that you have your master's degree, and it's also really cool that your master's research was the first study to directly examine the relationship between weight loss and weight regain, comparing meal plans to flexible diets. So how did you conduct this research and what did you find?
Yeah, so shout out to Dr. Bill Campbell, who's my advisor and still a great friend today, out of USF. So now we've really, really amped up the program, and the entire lab is pretty much dedicated to, his lab is dedicated to physique science research. So it's really, really cool stuff that we have coming out of there. Like all the research now since I've graduated, we've done like high protein female resistance training studies, glute training studies. We've done diet break research, refeed research. Like, so it's really, really cool stuff coming out of there. But pretty much we, sat down, kind of throwing some ideas around, and we thought this would be a cool, topic to look at, because at this point hadn't really been looked at yet. This was the I got in at the end of 2014. So my first semester was, exactly 4 years ago. So we were in the planning stages, and then 2015 is when I conducted the research. And still to this day, nobody's replicated it since. So in any case, basically we recruited participants who were resistance trained. They were not physique athletes, but they were people who had a resistance training background. So some were average weight, some were a little bit overweight, but it was a pretty just, mixed bag of people who work out and are interested in dieting, but no, extremely obese, overweight people. So it is harder to recruit people for dieting studies when they're like a normal weight, which was not necessarily our intention, but we wanted to just say, hey, resistance training population. And so we did a 2-week baseline period. We got all the information from them. And then we had a 10-week dieting period where I saw them twice. And then a 10-week post-diet period where we followed them again twice. So we had 5 different measurements. And we basically were looking at all different measures of body composition, metabolic rate. We did do some hormonal stuff, which did not pan out very well. So that was a big waste of money. Love just, spending $2,000 on no results. But besides that, the metabolic and the body comp data was pretty clear that it really didn't matter. So we looked at, basically it was a flexible dieting plan. So we gave people their macros to hit for these 10 weeks in the dieting phase, along with a how to track macros ebook, because with research, you can't really coach people, because that would be obviously unfair and pretty biased. So we gave people that information. We gave them, some more education that they could do for tracking. And then the other group was a meal plan group. It did have options. So it was a little bit more of a flexible meal plan, but it was still a, hey, here's a list of foods that you can eat, and here are a few things that you can switch out. So we did that for 10 weeks. And then for the 10-week post diet, we said, hey, eat whatever you want, but please come back for testing again. We need your data. And we did all the same measurements the entire time. We also did a psychological questionnaire, which is called the 3-factor eating questionnaire, which is one of the ways to look at different, flexible and rigid restraints kind of dieting. So pretty much the results showed, as far as scientific, stats go, there was not really much difference between the groups. Actually, there were 0 differences on any measures besides lean body mass. For the flexible group did increase in the post-diet period significantly, where it did not in the meal plan group. Honestly, we've gone back and we've looked at other markers as far as total calories they were eating based on their, food recalls. We went back and looked at protein, looked at training time. There was nothing that we could see that would point to that direction. So, hey, it could have just been a random finding. Obviously I'm not like resting on that as like, oh, here's one thing that shows, flexible dieting is better. No, I look at it as pretty much everything's the same. So was talking to the participants, there was a lot of people. Basically what I learned from that was depending on where somebody is in their journey with like their health and fitness, is really going to depend on what type of diet is going to be best for them. So there was a lot of people who thrived with the meal plan because they really just didn't have a lot of food education. They didn't know what to eat beforehand. And then now, they had a better idea of portion sizes, what kind of food they should be choosing. And then likewise, some people really thrived on the flexible plan because they had been, tracking macros before, and they'd been a little bit more in tune with kind of that stuff already. And then vice versa, the people who had been tracking before, who went on the meal plan, were like, I wouldn't want to do this, forever. But then also the people who had no food education, who got put on the macros, were like flailing around and were like, I do not know what to do. I don't like this. So lots of really great real life application there. That it's, not a one size fits all approach, and it really just depends on where somebody is in their journey.
Wow, I love that. That is awesome. And I appreciate you sharing all of that with us, because it definitely brings perspective, and it helps to set aside that, I guess, sometimes cattiness between like meal plan versus if it fits your macros, when in reality, what you've discovered and what you're sharing here is it's really about what's going to work for you and based on where you're at as well.
Yes, and there's also a huge difference between the type of meal plan that we had versus the type of meal plan that a lot of people are bashing, which would be a ultra restrictive 6-food group bodybuilding meal plan, along with not even necessarily the plan, but more of the coaching that can sometimes come with that. So generally what we find is when people have these negative connotations with, let's say, a meal plan or something like that, they've also had some negative connotations with the coaching style. And I feel like, and this could happen with tracking macros as well. If somebody's extremely dogmatic and do this because I told you so, and there's no modifications and this and that. And so I think that there's a lot of different psychological variations that can really, really hinder somebody depending on the type of diet they choose as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So something I'm super passionate about is eating psychology. And when I was earning my psychology degree, it was pretty much what I focused a lot of my like papers on and studies on, because it's very interesting to me, especially within the bodybuilding community. And helping competitors with their relationship with food, their body, and their goals is really a big part of this sport that usually gets swept under the rug. And I think more people are becoming aware of all, the good, the bad, and the ugly behind the sport, but even more so like the mindset that goes into it and the way that we can get impacted by perpetual dieting or constantly staying in prep mentality or never having other standards outside of prep lifestyle or being, near stage ready. So what are some things you've done to maintain a healthy mindset regardless of your season?
I think that it's so important, and this is something that I really, really try and instill with clients. Competing, you're going to have to look at what is your goal with competing. If you're looking to do a few shows because you want to have fun, maybe do it for a few seasons, it's a little bit less of an issue, right? Now, if somebody comes to me and they're like, I want to turn pro. All right, that is a whole different goal. And we are going to have a lifelong of successful habits set up, right? Because yes, we might be really, really working hard towards this one goal, but it is not likely going to be done in a short amount of time. It might be done in a short amount of time. There's plenty of people who their first season, they turn pro, right? And sometimes that is just the way that it works out. But for many people, it's not, right? So you're going to have to work and chip away for years at this. So if you think that you're going to come in there and diet and diet and diet for years and years and years and take little short off seasons here and there where basically you just add a bunch of weight very quickly and have terrible relationship with food, you are not going to last. And that is who we're seeing who's get spit out by the competitive world, and then it's competition's fault. No, it was the perception that you had to perpetually compete. And hey, guess what? I fall into that category too. I've learned a lot of my own mistakes because of what I have done. And now I can actually coach people on how not to do that, right?
Yes.
Because I didn't, as many people, I didn't know, this is going to have ramifications later. You just think, I'm fine. I feel great. I'll just, have this few month off season. I'll just eat whatever I want. Time to diet again. Gonna diet again. And especially if you're doing semi well. So here's what, when people start doing decent, they get some, first or second, maybe an overall at the, local level, maybe go to nationals, get a few top 5s. They just want to keep going and going and going. And that's what happened to me as well. So what really you have to do, and this is what I really just hammer into my clients, is, hey, if you are ready and your physique is 100% on point, then yeah, we're going to push. But we can only push for so long. And then we have to pull back, make the necessary changes, and then push really hard again. Because when it comes time to prep, I am pushing clients very hard to look their absolute best. But we can only do that if you have taken the appropriate time in the off season to build your metabolism back up, build your hormones back up, have a better relationship with food, train hard. Because the reality is that most people who compete truly do not have enough muscle in the right areas in order to be successful diet after diet.
Totally. Yeah. And we see this over and over again. And now I think because of people like you talking about taking longer off seasons, talking about how important this is, it is becoming more of an okay thing where not as many girls, I don't think, are feeling like I'm going to miss out just because it's being talked about more, for sure.
Yeah, when I was doing this, it was not talked about at all. Like when I was still an amateur and even as an early pro, nobody was talking about this, which is fine. I mean, again, not that if somebody had been talking about it, maybe I would have changed my mind. Maybe I wouldn't have. I'm not really sure. It was, semi short-sighted on my part. And now now that I know more about physiology, and now that I've coached a lot more people through this, I've seen kind of the ramifications. And I think that especially in the bikini division, that there's a really, really strange perception, I guess, put on bikini competitors. And I think that I wrote a whole long post and a newsletter article, and actually did a podcast about it too with Celeste, not you, my Celeste. Yeah, Celeste Bonin on the Unglamorous Life. So that'll be out in a few weeks. Talking about kind of this perpetual dieting, and what ended up happening was that a lot of people used to look at bikini as the attainable division, right? Air quotes now, because bikini is very far from attainable at the highly competitive levels. The girls who are winning have solid muscular base, like I said, especially in the right areas. They have very developed shoulders, glutes, hamstrings. I don't care what any judge is saying. They're looking for that, okay? They're looking for very lean individuals. So the only people who can stay super, super lean are people who are naturally very thin, who have added a lot of muscle over time. So you ever see people who are like, oh, I was 90 pounds when I started my fitness journey. Now I'm 120. Those people are going to stay pretty lean, right? But for most people who are dieting and actually have to diet into shows, 15, 20, 30 pounds, that is not attainable whatsoever, right? Like my physique, that is not attainable. Look, I am 2 steps away from a coffin when I'm getting on stage. It's just, it's the reality, and it's not a problem. I have no problem saying that. It is what it is, right? So I think a lot of people have this perception of, oh, bikini is attainable. I can do it year round. And that's what I thought too, because, well, it was a little different when I was starting out. When I turned pro versus now is a whole different game as far as how people look. But even back then, right? Like, oh, bikini is attainable. You can do it all the time. And then it becomes this, oh, well, if I'm not shredded year round, people aren't going to listen to me or follow me or be a part of my journey. So I think that there is a huge pressure for bikini specifically, and not to disclude other divisions, because I do understand that can happen across all divisions as well. But typically people who are in figure and physique, they understand, okay, I'm going to need some more size. I got to take some time off. Whereas a lot of the bikini girls are like, oh, I'm pretty much there. I'm like a pound off. I'll just keep doing this.
Totally have seen that as well. Like the shift in the bikini division is very different. Looking back from 2013, 2014, 15 to now it's almost mind-blowing how different it is. It's not as attainable. And it almost is, it's actually crazy to me that it's promoted in such a way. Or even like, I'm going to share like something that pisses me off so much is literally when they'll be like narrator, I don't know, what is it, broadcasting like some of the top shows, and the broadcasters will be like, bikini is the most attainable look. Like if you're going to the gym already, or you're training and you have some muscle, like you can do well if you have the shape. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like that is not true anymore. Like if that was true, so many more of us would be like killing it at all.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like there has to be new standards and new levels, and especially because it's become more competitive now. You can't be mediocre. You can't be an average girl who goes to the gym. Like that's just not how it looks. And you took time off because you felt like you weren't competitive at the level you needed to, right?
Oh yeah. And I mean, it's been a year since my last show. And I honestly don't even know and I'm in a different place in my life as well. So I've been competing since 2011. So that's
Yeah.
part of it too. I've just competed a lot. But I am very honest with myself as a pro, looking at what are the girls looking like. And right now I might look a lot denser because I have, put on some muscle. I've put on some size, but I know my body when I diet down as a natural athlete, when I get to a certain level of leanness, I do lose more muscle, right? So I need to be in a different place, substantially different place with my physique in order to step back on stage. Now, I also have a lot of other things going on that I'm focusing on. If I was only focusing on that, maybe I could get on stage faster. But with the way the business is right now and, mentoring my coaches and building the team and doing all these different things, that is not necessarily my number one goal right now. So it's going to take me a little bit longer, right? So I'm probably not even going to step on stage next year. I would most likely say that it would be 2021. But who knows? Crazier things have happened, and maybe by the end of the year, I'm feeling really good. And honestly, I've done this for so many years that I kind of know, like, yep, it's a good time, like, to start. Like, but until I feel that way, it is not a good time for me to start. Because I've done preps like that where I just force myself into it, and yeah, I make it, but it's far different. Like last year when I competed in 2018, I did 5 shows and I emptied the tank for all intents and purposes. Like it was everything I had, like physique wise, that I could do, and I felt very good about that. So the next time that I want to do that, I know what it takes for me personally to get there. And I think that's really important for people to understand. There's some people who prep for 10 weeks and they could win the whole show. There's other people who last year I prepped for 37 weeks for 5 shows. Like it was literally crazy. But for me, that's what it takes to get to that level of leanness and hope to preserve a little bit of muscle mass in the process. So, and I know what it takes to get there. So as a person, you have to have enough self-awareness and a good coach in order to say that. I won't tell clients, we're like, oh, can I be ready for this? Nope. Sorry, you're not going to be ready for that. But we got to pick another show. As much as you want to be ready, that's not going to be the best look for you. And that's not going to be the best thing mentally for you either. So I think it's really important for the client or the individual to be self-aware. And I also think that it's important to have a good coach in your corner who's going to be honest with you and who's going to push you. I'm not saying that I tell people, oh, we can't do the show because they're not ready to push them, but it's just not realistic.
Right. Exactly. I had the same experience last year. I also did 5 shows. I prepped for so long because I prepped to get back on stage in 2017. And then I continued that for a year after 2017, August to September of 2018. Show. And there is a level of almost like burnout that gets experienced because you're putting your body through so much, and your body's at this level where it's always serving you. It's always doing its best to support you. Like your body is your best friend. Like she will always look out for you. And I truly believe this, but you also have to do your part in looking out for her and making sure she can perform at her highest level. So taking that time off, as hard and scary as it might be, especially if we connect those things to relevance, or we connect those things to staying competitive, or we connect them to being well known by the judges. Those are a lot of the thoughts that go through our mind. But what I found by taking time off too is my focus went on other places. I was able to repair a lot of the hormonal damage that I had from that had actually started before I recommitted to competing, and that was a mistake in the first place that I ignored and shoved under the rug. But then fixed it now, and I'm good for like 7 months with my period, and I'm back on prep, and my body's responding again because I allowed her to literally have the break she needed to recover. And I wasn't playing that because I knew I couldn't step on a national stage and do well. Like it would have been pointless to continue prepping. And I think it's easy for girls to get really addicted to the stage. And I know this is a topic that you've been bringing up a lot more and really wanting to shed more light on. So what are some things that you do to, give that wake up call to girls and let them know, like, hey, we need that time off?
Yeah. The addicted to competing is very common. First and foremost, if you enjoy the whole process and then you get on stage, it's very exhilarating. So I think that part of it is not a bad thing, right? Like if you get up there and you really enjoy it, like that's fine. Like it totally go all in on it. Like, I am fine with that. And I'm fine with people being very like excited to do it. If you're not excited to do it, please don't do it. Like, there's literally zero reward in you doing it if you do not enjoy it. So that's first and foremost. That part of like that really big high that you get from it is normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what ends up happening, what I find from the negative side effects of competing all the time and maybe, having the stage addiction and this and that, is that people don't have anything else going on in their life. And this is the singular thing that they focus on. So that is what I really, really want people to veer away from, as far as, because that's when they put their entire self-worth into having abs and getting a call out. And we've seen those people, maybe some of you guys follow that person on social media and you can read it through their posts, or maybe that person is even you. And then you're listening to this and you're like, wow, like that's what this has turned into for me. And it's okay. It happens. Like, it's not like you're the only person this is happening to. But that's what I really try and encourage people to have, things that are outside of it that they do for themselves as well. And whether that's, some kind of, and this can especially happen in the off season. So during prep, obviously things get pretty intense as far as like, hey, you got to train several days a week. You got to do cardio several days a week. You got to be really on top of your diet. Your sleep better be on point. You have less variation that you can handle when you are prepping. But afterwards, why I think people get addicted to it, and then they continue to do it, is because they have nothing else to fall back on. So when you have transitioned out of prep, don't go, oh man, I can't get on stage again for a while. I have nothing else in my life. No, now is when you have all these other things that you can focus on. So I find it's really helpful for people to have training goals. So actually like going in the gym, and even if I think when I say that, sometimes people think that training goals means you have to do a powerlifting meet or something, which totally do that if you want to. I'm also 100% on board with that. But even like, if you train like a quote unquote bodybuilder, you can still have training goals that you're like working towards, right? So totally, I think that having non-physique related goals when you're training is really fun. Also, you could even start doing, a few classes here and there for other things that are not necessarily bodybuilding related. Like if you're going to take an extended off season, hey, why don't you start adding in yoga once a week? I'm going to start doing jujitsu once a week. I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to be good at jujitsu, but it's going to be a fun physical thing that I'm doing that is not necessarily bodybuilding, but it's also stimulating for my mind. It's not related to physique. So there's a lot of other benefits. And then there's also too, like doing things outside of fitness, right? Like, do you have a significant other? Like, what about, friend time? Like, what about just traveling or reading? Like, I'm a huge nerd and love to read. So there's a lot of things that you can do that are outside of competing. And I think the off season is a really, really important time to hone in on those things that you enjoy. Because if you only focus on competing 24/7, then it's really, really hard to take time away.
Yeah, it definitely is. And when you kind of first get that taste of, okay, I'm not competing again, like what's next? I always like to teach my clients too, and I don't do physique coaching or anything like that. I'm strictly just on the food relationship, body relationship, and goals. It's really like after a show, set new standards for yourself that you want to fulfill or are committed to fulfilling, because a lot of us have this all or nothing mentality. And especially if you're coming out of a lot of shows, or if you feel like that's been your number one focus. So then you go into that, well, now it's nothing. So by having new standards and also communicating with your coach about those standards, and hopefully having a coach that, even if they're not providing a plan, would still be fine with you checking in with them and seeing how things are going. But that's besides the point for right now. I mean, having standards, like you said, outside of fitness for your life, or even within fitness. And I think it's awesome when you can find new things. It's basically an opportunity to learn what is life and what is your lifestyle without competing. And if you know that you'll still enjoy fitness and you'll still enjoy fueling your body the way that you want to, while enjoying your life and enjoying the things that you're doing with people around you, it's a great it's like a great efficacy builder to know that without competing, you can still be healthy and really happy and feel good about yourself.
Oh, for sure. And I think people really lose sight of that. And it's unfortunate. And I see that is really the struggle. That is the real struggle that people deal with.
And it's so cool that you're starting jiu-jitsu. I commented on your photo actually last night. I was like, that is awesome, because
not like I'm gonna be like, like I said, who knows how long I'll do this if I, whatever. But basically if anybody follows Jocko Willink, if you don't, I would suggest it, and listen to pretty much everything that him and the Echelon Front team puts out. But they're very big into jiu-jitsu. So I went to one of their events earlier this year, and there was a little like intro class. And we just did a few basic things. And then when I was out in San Diego, I actually went and trained at one of the gyms they have. And I took a class and was like, I like this. And then I finally, did one this weekend here. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm just going to do this. And I'm going to commit to, for most people who do jiu-jitsu or really any martial arts, like you're supposed to go multiple times a week to really develop that kind of proficiency. But based on when they offer the classes, I just can't do that with my schedule right now. So for right now, I'm literally just going to go like once a week. Hopefully that's like my goal, and just learn some stuff and enjoy it. I'm not trying to like do a competition or be the best at it, but just really interested in it. And it's really, really mentally challenging. Like it's one of the hardest mental things that I've done in a while, because somebody's showing you a move, and then you have to do it, and then you have to remember all these intricacies, and then when you do get to the position where a few moves, now you have to figure out how to get out of a bad situation. So it's really cool. So I'm excited to try it, see how I like it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's super cool. It's such a great sport, and I won't lie, like I was when I first got into it, and I would cry a lot on the mat because I'm super emotional as is, and then when you add in like high stress situation and then not understanding something and then also having your ass kicked in the meantime, like it's just painful, and it's definitely a great test. But I would always tell myself, like, it's better in here than out on the streets. Like I'd rather know what I'm gonna be doing. And of course a big part of a lot of different jiu-jitsu, specifically Japanese jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of different art forms of it, but like you learn a lot of self-defense as well, from stand-up to also ground defense, which is awesome and makes you feel really good. But like you said, there's definitely a mental challenge, and it's cool even doing it once. You there?
Yeah, it just like dropped out for a second. Okay, we're back.
Hello. But yeah, it's definitely a mental challenge. I just think it's super cool that you're doing that. Aside from jiu-jitsu and getting into other things, and obviously growing your team and training your coaches, and just creating an awesome, or I guess I should say expanding on your awesome mission with Team LocoFit, what else are you currently focusing on for yourself and your goals right now?
Yeah, so the main thing right now is continuing to, hammer on. Sorry, I'm like, sometimes I try to say things and I'm like, okay, I'm doing jujitsu, but like I'm speaking now, so I'm really trying to hammer home the point to my team as well as everybody else, like the educational message, and like that's what we're really trying to like send out. And then just really trying to improve on my leadership skills, because it's something that I have, tried to work on over the years. At first, it was just leadership for myself, then it was leadership for my clients, but now it's leadership for the people on my team as well. So it's really exciting. It's a really exciting time. So always just trying to learn on how to be a better leader, and how I can do a better job, with them. And then also just continuing to learn new things, because I find that it's, when you're in school, it's a lot different, because then you're just, you're kind of forced to learn things. Whereas now I have to, while I am trying to put out a lot of information as well, I still have to learn new things before I can put out information, right?
Yes.
So I'm always trying to like hone in different skills and like stay up to date with different interesting either like lines of research or even just books that have come out. And I really, really enjoy learning more about psychology, in kind of a like a less straightforward like school way, but just like the kind of just psychology basically behind things, right? So it all kind of ties together with like education, self-development, leadership, but that's really like my main focus right now.
Yeah, of course. And so you like to keep up to date on different research. Has there been any recent research within the scientific community or realm in terms of physique development or coaching or anything along those lines that has then been beneficial to your approach to coaching with your clients? Anything that's just really stood out to you?
Yeah, so I'll say two things. So one, less direct physique related, but very important for pretty much every client. So I found over the years that there's always people who seemingly kind of have before I knew these words, but a negative stress perception, right? And
Yes.
those were always the clients who were having just more issues kind of all around. They have more digestive issues, they have more issues with making progress, they have more just emotional instability, it seems like. And then there's always people who seem to just have a really, really good like handle on their stressors. Like, hey, there's a lot of shit going on, but I'm on top of it, taken care of. And I was actually finding pretty much that one of the biggest things that I was seeing was that there was a big relationship with people's stress perception as far as the negative perception goes, and just these weird gut problems that were coming out of nowhere, right? Like, oh, I'm bloated and I'm not digesting my food and all these things. And these are people who don't necessarily have true food problems, right? Like food intolerances and things of that nature. So I started doing a little bit of research on this, and there actually is a line of research, and it's basically, if you look it up, it's stress is debilitating or stress is enhancing, and that's kind of like the way that they define it. So stress is debilitating is, somebody who would have a negative stress perception. So they have a stressor or something due or whatever, and they look, oh, I don't have the resources to do this. I'm not capable of doing this. And they're very kind of negative about it, and it pulls them down. It's debilitating. And then there's the other group of people who the stress is enhancing. So they have this challenge and they're like, oh, it's a challenge. I'm going to rise up and I'm going to meet it. I have the resources. I have the cognitive function to do this. I can handle it. I've taken care of it. And those people, there's literally they've measured different hormonal responses. So the way that, cortisol is released, that is a stress hormone. Everybody knows that. But what is a normal response is also cortisol will be released, but then the opposite will be released, which is DHA sulfate. So it's not an exact opposite, but cortisol is a catabolic hormone and DHA would be an anabolic hormone. So they're usually secreted in unison when there's a situation, so that even if you do have a stressor come up, you can kind of come back to baseline, right? Like, let's just think of it that way. Whereas I've done some research where people have been in these situations, and the people who kind of are more in the stress is debilitating situation, they only release cortisol and they do not release DHEA to match it. So that those are people who can have just kind of dysregulated cortisol over time. So I've also just found it, and I didn't, like I said, didn't need a research paper to see that, but it's cool that they actually have documented that as well.
Right.
And I found that has been one of the most important things, is just to coach people with, is just looking at how they handle stressors. And how they handle their perception around things. Like, are you given a task and then you crumble, or are you given a task and then you rise up and you accomplish it? And even if you are the first person, right, you crumble when you have a lot of things going on. Well, there's ways to circumvent that. And that is kind of where the, leadership of coaching kind of comes through, and, understanding, basic psychology, but also just basic like organizational skills and things like that. So coaching has kind of morphed into not only, hey, here's your macros, here's your training program. That's, that's basic stuff. But it's, I've really, really tried to hammer the holistic approach where I'm looking at all of these things. So that would be really the coolest, I would say, research that I have. I don't know how recent that paper was or anything, but I stumbled upon it.
I love that.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And then I would say I'll just point out two cool pieces of literature that are pretty new. So again, on Dr. Campbell's lab, we have a ton of physique science research coming out. So they've just started the diet break research, which will not be published, for a little while. But there was a refeed study that has been put out, and so I'm not sure if the full paper is published yet, or if just the abstract is out, because it was presented at a conference. But basically, looking at the idea of 2 consecutive refeeds versus just consistent dieting. So 7-day period of just the same numbers versus 5 days of lower numbers, 2 days of refeed numbers, and at the end of the week the calories matched. So it's just a difference of the days. And again, these were not physique competitors, but they were people who were resistance training. And in our research lab now, when they were doing resistance training studies, they train, everybody has basically like a trainer, like the lab coordinators and stuff there. You have almost like a personal trainer there. So they are overseeing all of the workouts. So it's not just somebody's like going there and you don't really know how they're training. So people were training hard. And so, but not physique competitors. It was a diet though. It wasn't like, super aggressive physique diet. But the people who had the refeeds did lose, I think it was roughly the same amount of body fat, but they did maintain more muscle mass. So pretty much what we've seen in practice as well. Like if you can keep in refeeds, it's pretty helpful for people. Now, I don't have refeeds for a lot of clients just because there's, research to back it up, and it works for some people doesn't mean that it works for everybody, but it is cool now to see that something that we've been doing kind of anecdotally has been put into the literature. And then another really great article that came out recently, Eric Helms co-authored this with a few other people, and it was pretty much like it's talking about a nutritional paradigms, like shifting that for like long-term success in bodybuilders essentially, and physique competitors. And they really do a good job of blending kind of body image and the kind of physiological stuff that happens, and really giving a good outline for people like, hey, this is kind of, like what you should be looking out for, like what you should be doing. It's a good review of a lot of literature. And it is free and open access. So
Nice.
Actually Helms just put this on his website, bunch of different articles. So if you go to Team 3DMJ and you check out, the scientific part, he's linked up a bunch of his articles there, and that is a new open access one. So that means anybody can just click on it, download it. It's for free. So yeah, I actually have it on my desk. What is the name is Towards a Sustainable Nutrition Paradigm in Physique Sport, a Narrative Review. So they look at really a lot of the stuff from a biological perspective, as well as the mental health aspect too.
That is awesome information. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I really hope that people go and look at it, because it's not just for like, science nerds or psych nerds or whatever. Like, go and read it, because there's usually a lot of applicable information, or you can reach out to your coach or someone who does understand it and see how you can apply it to your life. And something you mentioned about the stress that I think would be awesome to share here is, when people are feeling this way, it can be impacted also in the way that they're perceiving food, the way that they are perceiving, the actual choices they're making. That's why some clients are so afraid, or some competitors are so afraid to actually have a refeed meal that's not just like extra rice or extra rice cake, sort of like they're actually fearful of foods. And I went through a bunch of different studies on actually how the way that we perceive food and the way that our body then reacts with different neurotransmitters and also hormone release, which you brought up as well. And I think what's really interesting is, if you look at a burger, for example, as something that's going to be super fattening and it's going to make you ruin all your progress, and it's like, even my stomach hurts saying this, it's so crazy, but like, if you have all these different negative connotations around the meal you're about to eat, regardless of what that meal is, your body is not going to be primed to digest it the way that it would need to in order to get the maximum benefit from it. But when you bring to the table a healthy, positive mindset about any food you're eating, that then results in a different, of course, digestive process, in which case you are digesting at the highest function possible, and then you get the most out of the food, which means usually less fat storage and also better gut health. And it's interesting how much the mind does play a role in what we do with our food. And we literally give so much power to food, because it only has power because we're giving it to it, with labels, with restriction, with like literally over obsessing about it and thinking about it all the time. When if we just allow ourselves to see it as a tool and as something that helps us, but also serves us in our life and our lifestyle, and we create positive relationships with it, which of course can come from a lot of different applications depending on where the person is at with their relationship with it, then we can have better use of the food we're eating. And we end up having now better physique and a better relationship with food. So it's a win-win across the board.
Yeah, we know so little about the mental aspect, to be honest. Like it's so powerful. And like I said, this is just something that I've noticed over the years with clients. Like, why do some people do so much better than others? Like there's obviously something going on, and it's not just the macro prescription and obviously there are plenty of factors that match how somebody is going to look and respond. But sometimes when all things are considered equal, it really comes down to the mental approach that somebody has.
Yeah, it does. And I'm so glad to hear about like coaches who do apply that or do look out for their clients' mental health, because it's just one of, if not the most important aspect of this. And another thing you mentioned too was that part of the whole transitioning out of like diet mentality, right, and that obsession over prep life. And a lot of our listeners wanted to know, like, how did you transition into not tracking as much, or what are you currently doing for your nutrition?
So I think that it's context is super important. So I've been, growing up, I had a pretty severe eating disorder. So I've been very cognizant of what I've been eating since a very young age. And then I got into, the whole physique sports and things like that. So I've been pretty aware of my food. Even before I knew what macros were, I was actually studying, I was in school to be a dietitian. So I had been measuring food for years, right? Even if I wasn't tracking the macros per se, I was following portion sizes and things like that. So I've become very, very aware of what is in food. And I could, even if I didn't necessarily track it after I ate it, I could just sit down and do it in my head. Okay, what did I eat today? I've always operated off of pencil and paper. I do not use tracking apps. I think that they're absolutely mind-boggling terrible for me. I find them to be very frustrating. I'm like not a person in the 21st century apparently with apps, but so I've always been pen and paper. So I find that I have less of an attachment to this obsession with, potentially I think that there could be something with the tracking apps that really get people even extra crazy. So for me, I can eat something and later write it down. Okay, what did I eat? Okay, bam, this is what I had. So for me, I've been doing this for so long that even if I'm not necessarily hitting, like I'm not tracking every gram per meal, I'm still weighing a lot of my food. I'm making sure that I get enough protein. Like that's really first and foremost. So that's like what I structure all of my meals around, is getting at least 4 protein meals a day, of, trying to get in as much as I can. So usually that looks like 3 whole meals and then protein shake, like 2 scoops of protein after I work out. So getting the protein in, number one. So I do, track all that. And then there's other stuff that I, at this point I make pretty good decisions, as far as like what I'm eating. So I do work with icon meals. So a lot of times I'll just heat up an icon meal. Bam, I'll add some, extra veggies and some fruit. I got a meal. And I kind of know now how much I should be eating, even if I don't put it into an app exactly every day. Right now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm like the picture perfect bodybuilder every day, right? Like there's plenty of times where I'm eating high calorie food, right? I travel a lot, have a few drinks when I go out. I might get dessert. Like that's my thing, it's dessert. But I'm making conscious choices when I want to eat higher calorie. Like it's literally as simple as that. There's no attachment at this point to, oh no, should I be doing that? I've realized that I'm in a place where I've dieted for so many years that my body is probably going to fight me no matter what I do at this point. So I'm simply eating to reach, somewhat satiety, because I have a pretty big appetite, from all the years of dieting. So I'm going to stick to high protein. I'm going to stick to high micronutrients, going to eat a decent amount of fiber. And then when I want to indulge and eat a little bit higher calorie, I do. And that's pretty much where my nutrition is at right now. Is it perfect? Do I have abs? No, you know what I mean? But it's also where I'm at in my life. Well, yeah, that is definitely there. How do I get my butt to look like yours? I'm like, just eat more. I don't know. It's pretty easy when you got body fat. You just kind of goes there. Obviously I do train too. But there's a compromise. So right now I'm a little bit more lax with what I'm, as far as what I'm tracking and eating, and it shows. I'm not necessarily as, super, super lean, but with the amount of output that I'm putting into my nutrition, making good choices most of the time, but still focusing on other things, that's kind of, it's perfect for where I'm at right now.
I love it. And so sometimes there's like controversial subjects, I think, and one of those is genetics. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier about how you're not, like, you didn't start off as a super lean girl. Like, you're not one of those people who can just like maintain that lean body. That's like you're 2 steps away from a coffin, you said. And I think this is something that needs to be discussed more. And I've heard you discuss it on the Redefine Healthy Radio. And I remember listening to that episode going like, I want to hear more. Like, I just need to hear more about it. So can you expand on genetics even further in the sense of how someone's body might react post-show?
Yes. So first and foremost, if you're talking about body composition, genetics reigns supreme. I don't care what anybody says, that is it. Especially when we're talking about physique sports. You could work for 20 years to have the best physique ever. Somebody who's been working out for a year and barely dieting with better genetics might beat you. And that is the sad reality, but that's sports, right? The same thing, I'm never going to be an Olympic gymnast, okay? Like, no matter how hard I tried, it probably wouldn't happen. Well, it certainly wouldn't happen. But you know what I'm saying? So genetics do reign supreme at the top of the hierarchy, always. So, but that being said, if you have normal genetics, doesn't mean that you can't look amazing. Like, it's not a negative thing to say that. But I do think that some people really, really like hold themselves to a, oh, why don't I look like this person? They got there so quickly. That's not your body. You know what I mean? Like, it's not it. I heard a really great thing. Dave Tate was interviewing J.M. Blakely, and he basically was talking about, somebody might have to put 2 cents in to look a certain way, and you got to put in a whole dollar to look that way, right? So a lot of times what it comes down to is you're putting in way more work for way longer to look maybe half as what somebody else might look like. And again, that is just the reality of it. So for genetics, as far as being very, very lean all the time, like I kind of said earlier, when you look at people who are naturally thinner, don't have a lot of body fat, but don't have a lot of muscle either, right? They're just thin people. Those people, generally speaking, can stay leaner. I've seen in my experience. They are working really hard to put on muscle mass, and the eating and the training that they're doing is typically going towards that. And they can maintain a little bit leaner, and they don't have as many side effects, right? So if you ever hear people who are, pretty lean and they're like, oh, I feel great. Like, sleep's good, hormones are good. Like, mentally, I feel pretty stable. And I have clients like that, you know what I mean? And I've had to, shift my perspective of like, oh God, maybe we should make that, should they gain more weight? Are they at an unhealthy level? No, they're functioning for all intents and purposes, perfectly fine. There's other people who do not feel like that, right? They're constantly low energy, brain fog, mood instability, chronically hungry, can't sleep worth a shit. Their training sucks. Those people are likely going to have a little bit more body fat. And after the show, for those people, you're going to have to push them pretty hard to get lean enough. And afterwards, those are the people who might gain weight faster than others. Now, there are situations where even people who have, let's say, the best genetics, right? They're going to go through periods that they dieted too much potentially, where they might have, some trouble off season as well. But in general, I would say that there's going to be people who are just going to need to have a little bit of a higher body fat in order to train hard, recover, sleep, hormonal function, mood, all of that. So doesn't mean you have to get fat in a month, like you gain 30 pounds overnight. No, nobody's saying to do that. But don't expect to be 5-10 pounds off stage weight if you are the person who, doesn't feel good there. So for me, I typically, after I reach about 135 threshold of body weight, body fat, is when I'm not feeling too hot anymore. And it is literally a daily struggle to get leaner. And I typically, like last year, competed around 128. That was like a fully peaked, 128. So I'm getting almost 10 pounds off of that death feeling, right? And right now I'm at about 160. So that is also, again, because I've now, again, all these shows, all this competing, my body is just kind of like, hey, we want to sit here. And I'm finally like, you know what? I'm not fighting it right now. I'm not eating like a total asshole. I'm not, just falling off plans terribly, still training, but coming back from a lot of injuries and just kind of stuff like that. So, but there's going to be periods where I've maintained lesser weight as well, and still felt fine. But so there's a different range for everybody. So don't be afraid to, kind of deviate from that weight in a, sustainable way, like slowly bring it up, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because you will feel like shit if you do just completely gain so much weight in a few weeks that's just inevitable. But yeah, I think that genetics really reigns supreme here, and everybody's going to function at a different level. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you shared that. I think the whole like story about, oh, you should only go gain 10 pounds post show, like, is so crazy to me because it's very arbitrary, first of all. And then second of all, how would you know if that's what your body needs, especially if you're a first-time competitor? And like you just mentioned, sometimes there are different set points for your body or different things based on your history. So I remember when I was gaining more weight after my most recent or last show, like 11 months ago, it was actually totally okay with me because I was doing it really slowly. It was controlled and, like you said, following a plan, also going off plan, enjoying life, lifting, training. Like, as long as you're doing the things you need to be doing, you're looking out for your health, your body's going to find its healthy place and you'll be fine, right? You're going to get back there. But then we apply genetics to, let's say, prepping and actually competing. And we see a lot of different girls stepping on stage with different genetics. And, like judging, like the judging criteria is specific. And in bikini, we're judged a lot on symmetry. So do you think that the judging criteria can apply to girls with different genetics, or do you think that girls without the genetics that maybe they're looking for should just let go of the idea of maybe progressing as far in the sport as they'd like to?
So again, I think this comes down to the perception, right? I still think that people can compete and do very well without ever, being the absolute best, right? The goal, if you're really in this for the long haul, you'll know it if you enjoy it because of, as cheesy as it sounds, just the process, right? Just doing that work every single day for however many years, right? Now, have I seen people with just the absolute best genetic shape, muscle insertions, all that kind of jazz, go up there and win it, and just, those people who just come out and you're like, damn, they're just undeniable, right? That is what's going to be most attractive to the judges, of course, but it doesn't mean that you can't do well because you have worked now for 5 years to build up certain areas and bring down other areas. Like, so I definitely think that it's possible for people with all different body shapes in bikini. I think bikini is really the only division you can do that. I don't figure and beyond. It's pretty set what they're looking for. Physique maybe a little bit different with body types, but figure is pretty set. Like, you got to kind of look like one way or that's it, right? Like, yes. Figure is very, very, kind of a one standard. Bikini, the posing is very different. And you do see even amongst the top competitors at, let's say, like the Olympia or the Arnold, there's different body types in there that are rewarded, which is why it's so confusing to people who are watching and viewing. What the hell are they looking for? Well, depends on who's there. So I do think that people with not the, perfect bikini genetics can do well. But of course, if somebody shows up who has that, it might be a little bit more challenging, obviously, for that person. Now, I will say this too. I've seen a lot of people with amazing physiques who do not know how to showcase it on stage, whether that's nerves, posing, just experience. And that really, really hinders people. So I've had a few clients this year who, they look phenomenal. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely phenomenal. Get to the national shows and they either rush their performance, they're not super confident, they don't hit the poses right away. You're not getting looked at. You're getting dead last. Like, straight up, you can have the best physique. I've had clients with glute striations coming up there. Full, lean, hard, whole thing, pretty, everything. Nope, last call outs because they didn't showcase exactly in 3 seconds what they needed to. So somebody with a lesser, other things that need to be worked on with their physique, you're looking, you're like, oh, look at that person. What are they doing up there? Well, in those first few seconds, they might have shown something better, and that's who's going to get rewarded. So bikini is very, very interesting in that sense because, yes, there is a shape that they're looking for, but the people who do get rewarded do look different. And that comes down to the posing and the confidence and the presentation.
Yes, and bikini has so much more freedom to showcase your physique differently and in your own style, that even that could then play a role in, of course, the placing.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, so another thing I wanted to know, because we talked a little bit about like health and functioning, and I want to know for you from a coaching perspective, when you're looking at girls, maybe they're sending in their check-ins, what warning signs or indicators or kind of like red flags do you look for that might suggest a competitor needs a break or a diet break or to switch it up or have a refeed, get hormones checked, all those types of things?
So it's so hard because now at this point I've been coaching for a lot of years, so I can kind of just usually read it, and sometimes I'll read through it and then I'll say whatever. And they're like, how did you know that? And I'm like, well, I just kind of had this feeling, you know what I mean? I've just seen it enough. But when there's a lot of resistance as far as people are like, oh, I'm, scared to gain weight, or I don't want to do this, or, they start just showcasing those signs that like, this is really the only thing that's going on. That's kind of when I'm like, hey, we need to take a step back. What are you doing outside of the gym? What else do you have going on? As far as, hormonal stuff goes, it's tough because if you are dieting, you don't necessarily want to get blood work done because it's going to be low or high. Some of them are going to be lower, some are going to be higher. But that is an important thing that we should be doing in the off season as well. Obviously, I'm not an endocrinologist, but I can look at some basic things and at least suggest, hey, you should be getting this blood work. I want to see these results, and then you take care of that somebody else. Sometimes it's one to know to refer out to a mental health specialist when somebody's really, really, really. I mean, I basically play, psychologist. We always joke about that, but I'm definitely not a psychologist. So if somebody repeatedly over and over and over again is showcasing these kind of signs of potential eating disorder or potential just mentally not being in a good place for a whole host of, mental health issues, it's kind of like, hey, we might need to see somebody about this. And I have a lot of clients, so great that I'm so happy that people are so open with me that they're even like, hey, I know that this is the problem and I'm going to talk to you about it, but I do have a therapist that I'm already seeing. I'm like, oh, perfect. So
Good.
I think that it's great to have in conjunction. Obviously, you have to have the right therapist because there's plenty of, just like there's a lot of bad diet coaches, there's plenty of bad therapists who don't understand kind of this either. So I will say that. So sometimes it's finding the right therapist for somebody. But there's just a lot of things that you kind of have to look for. And part of that just comes with coaching, and part of that comes, with coaching experience. But part of that also comes with asking the right questions and getting the right feedback from your clients. So the updates that we have are very exhaustive as far as questions that are being asked and like answers that we need as coaches. And then if one of their answers or the responses is either too short, we kind of dig a little bit, or if it is kind of, maybe more of a red flag, myself or my coaches will say, okay, we need to kind of dig into this and talk more about this.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, I can tell you guys, I mean, based on your mission and what you've shared here, it definitely sounds like you guys are really committed to that kind of thing. So I have one more thing I really want to know before I ask you for some advice. How important is it for girls to make sure they're getting in their micronutrients?
Oh, super important. I think that's men and women need to have micronutrients in their diet. So a lot of people obviously focus on macronutrients, but we do need micronutrients to, survive and actually have healthy processes. So pretty much every process in the body is, uses different micronutrients as like cofactors. So absolutely, I think that some people will really kind of miss the mark there if they are, eating more like junky foods or whatever consistently. And even if you are eating pretty, we'll say clean, in air quotes, it can be really hard to get in all the micronutrients, which is why proper supplementation, in my opinion, is really critical. And not going crazy and having 1,000 things that you're taking, but having a few quality supplements for health is really, really hard to beat. Like having, getting the right micronutrients and multivitamin, getting in, really good omega-3 product, getting in vitamin D. These are things that, people need, and they're not getting necessarily in their diet.
Yeah, and making sure you actually need them too.
Oh, well, yeah. I think that, you can't really go wrong with the basics. And I think that a lot of people try and talk about all these crazy things. And I'm like, yeah, great. But okay, we're not even going to hit that until we focus on these. You know what I mean? I need to make sure that you're, taking these basics first before we even go there. I'd rather somebody do that. Hey, take a quality green powder and fish oil and vitamin D, and you're way better off than taking some extravagant, thing. Now,
Yes.
if you've gone and you've gotten blood work and you're deficient in other specific micronutrients, or you have a, kind of genetic mutation or things like that, yeah, you need to supplement with that as well. But just basic, I feel very confident saying to people, hey, take these few things, and then, we'll kind of dive in as needed with other stuff.
I love that. No, that's super cool. And I appreciate you sharing your perspective on it. And I always like to know at the end of shows, like, basically, what is your best advice for someone who is a newbie competitor? And then what is your best advice for someone who is going after their pro card?
So first time competitor, I would say that, be ready for the post-show experience. It is a lot harder than the actual prep. Everybody puts all their eggs in one basket for prep, and then they kind of forget about offseason. Again, I think that it's been talked about so much more now, which I think people getting into it understand a little bit better, but more and more people are getting into, especially the bikini and men's physique divisions. And a lot of people are just getting into it and they don't necessarily understand what's going to happen afterwards. They don't understand the physiology of weight regain. They don't understand the physiology of semi-starvation and what that does, both physiologically and psychologically. So it's really important if you're beginning this journey to understand that once the show is over, the work is not done. You're just getting started, because afterwards is a lot harder. And then for somebody who's looking to get their pro card, I would say you need to make sure at this point, because I've been going to shows now, since, like I said, I've been competing since 2011. I've been coaching people for, since 2013, going to all of the national shows, either for myself or for clients. And you're trying to turn pro. Yes, I understand if people think that it's important for the judges to know you, but what is more important is that you have an undeniable package. I don't care if you run yourself ragged and do 10 shows a year. If you don't look the part, you're not winning. Okay. So you need to have the physique, you need to have the, presentation, and you need to have the posing down. So all of those things need to kind of fall in place for you to earn your pro card, which means you're going to have to take time off to get to the place where you come out and you're kind of in that undeniable position.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that advice, and also sharing for everything that you've brought onto the show at all today. And it's been really amazing to hear your perspective on everything. And I honestly would love to do this again, because I feel like there's so much more we could get into. But for now, can you let people know where they could find you and connect with you, and maybe even work with you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So everything you can pretty much find on teamlocofit.com. That is our website where we have everything all about our mission as a team, all about the coaches, the different programs that you can get off of there. And you can also apply for coaching if you're interested. Now, a few cool ways to stay connected. We do have a newsletter, which is one of my favorite things that we do now. So it's not a spammy newsletter. It's educational. So there's you get free Metcons every week. And then there's also like an educational article written by myself or one of the 4 coaches. So that's really cool. So you can just go to the website again and just go to the top where it says subscribe, and you're good to go, and you'll be added to the list. Also, we have the Team LocoFit Roundtable, which is a new podcast that we're doing, which is myself again and the other 4 coaches. So that is on iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify. So just type in Team LocoFit Roundtable, and then everything else. So my YouTube channel is just Laurin Conlin, Laurin. Same with my Instagram. So LaurinConlin. Team 1 is just at Team LocoFit. And then, the 2 other podcasts that I do as well, Redefine Healthy Radio with Paul Ravella, and then the Unglamorous Life with Celeste Rains-Turk. So those are also on all the podcast platforms. So lots of ways to connect. You can send me a message, send me an email if you're interested, and if you have any questions and, want to work with us. But all that information pretty much on the site is kind of where you can find everything. I'm really proud of our website. We have a lot of stuff on there. So
yeah, it's amazing. And you do share so much value, and you share a lot of education and research-backed content, which is awesome. So I really appreciate you coming on again. And to everybody listening, I'm going to make sure all of that information, all those links are on the show notes page, which is always on celestial.fit/podcast. If you guys have any questions, let us know. We love to see the screenshots of you listening, the main takeaways, go and tell Laurin thank you so much, or if you learned anything from her. It's always so rewarding for, of course, the athletes and me to see that kind of thing. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys coming on again and listening. Laurin, thank you so much. And I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode.